Hi, I'm Talya, and this is Victoria.
Hi!
And we are two Tweedledums Thinking about our recent high school experience, uni apps, and life ahead of college. We're recent IB survivors, and we want you to survive it too.
So for today's podcast, we're going to be talking about how to be a good student leader in clubs. And this is very important, not just for university applications, so you look like, a wonderful leader, blah, blah.
Yes.
But, when you put things on your uni app, you don't just want to say, like, oh, I was a leader, but then you were crappy at doing it. You want to be a leader who did, impact your club members or your fellow leaders. And you want to make sure that your time spent in it is worthwhile.
Right.
That it's not just something that you list on your application, but something that you look back in high school and you're like, oh, that was fun. Or, oh my gosh, I remember how, we were, we had so much drama over that, but we got over it.
Yeah.
And of course, you want to be remembered as a good person by the people around you who are
For sure.
So we decided to do this episode because there are so many people who are interested in trying out for leadership, especially starting like grade 10,
right.
11, especially 12. And the thing is, other people in the real world, they have had so many experiences trying to go from the entry-level jobs up to becoming like the CEO. And it does take time. But in this case, you're in high school, oh my gosh, you're going to be the leader of a club, oh my. And it seems easy, but it's not. So we decided that we would tell you guys from our experience as student leaders in several clubs and activities, some tips on how to be a successful student leader to your friends and peers.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about it more from the perspective of being a sort of assistant teacher in the grade 10 drama class. And of course, I've led a bunch of other things, but just to focus in on something, that's what I'm going to talk about. And Victoria will be talking about her experience in Speak Up.
Yeah, so I'll be talking about my experience co-leading with other leaders in the MUN Speak Up Club.
Okay,
yes.
So first of all, we are going to be talking about planning and how important it is. So first of all, I would say lesson plans should include very specific details. So what I mean by specific details is, of course, the material you're going to use. So if that's going to be a video, you have to input the URL and make sure it's working, and be able to send it quickly to the students. Other things include how long you're going to spend doing a particular activity. So, for example, 20 minutes, or you want to give an approximation 20 to 30 minutes. And if you want to give them a particular task or assignment during class, you need to be ready with a specific list of instructions. So not something completely unplanned that you're just going to tell them. You have to be ready with something written so that if they need to refer back to it at a later point in the class, they can do that rather than having to, contact you, and that will take some time away from their actual work time. And you want to include specific notes about who will be presenting what part. So for example, I taught the class with Mr. Patrick and Victoria as well. So we had to know who was going to say what or who was going to be in charge of what thing. So ensure that you put that person's name right next to it and that you are all in agreement of who's doing what and when each thing is going to happen, the timing and things like that.
So basically what we're trying to say is when you plan, be intentional and be on the same page as your colleagues.
Yes,
and make
that's
sure
so
that when you explain the meeting or the activity or the whatever you're gonna do for that club meeting or lesson, make sure that the people you're teaching or your club members are on the same page with you.
Yeah, because I think sometimes when you're planning lessons or maybe when you're planning a meeting or something, correct me if I'm wrong, you know exactly what you want in your head. So sometimes you might feel like you are explaining something when in fact you aren't actually explaining it in a clear way. Because obviously when you know what you want to do, then you don't need to explain it as much. Whereas people who have not heard of the plan at all or weren't there when we were planning the lesson and discussing things are just completely lost. That might actually be the case. So you have to make sure everything is super clear and in order and using words that can apply to all kinds of learners.
Yeah. And so a way that I've personally have been planning, so for the Speak Up Club, we actually spend an hour every week, in addition to like the hour that we meet as a whole club, to plan. So it takes an hour to plan a 1 hour meeting.
People underestimate how long it takes to plan and how hard it is to plan. I think that's honestly more than half the battle sometimes.
Yeah, because with planning, you need to make sure that you want set goals or objectives, you know? You want your kids to come out of the meeting or the lesson with more insight or better skills or, you know, or something that is useful that they didn't have before. Right? And to make sure that that transfers from you as the leader to them as your underlings. You know, as your children. Yes. You want to make sure that it transfers to them in a way that they can absorb it and in a way that they can willingly grasp it, you know? Yeah. You don't just want to throw things at them and they're just like, this is just, I'm just saying.
You don't want them to just accept it passively. Yeah. You want an active learning experience that's engaging for both you as the leader or the teacher and them as students.
Yeah. So planning, super crucial. And like the idea of being on the same page as your other co-leaders. So
yeah, that can't be underestimated. That's so important. Yeah. And you don't want to have disagreements between you guys, because then the students are going to be able to feel that tension or feel even more confused if one person's saying one thing and the other person is saying another thing. Yeah, so that doesn't mean you can't disagree while you're planning, but you want to be on the exact same page when you're actually teaching lesson or leading the meeting.
For sure.
Yes. Okay, so the next part we are going to talk about is how you can be the right amount of assertive and get things done without being bossy in a bad way. Of course, in a way, you kind of are the boss. Yeah. You are the leader. But you don't want to let that get to your head and let it make you dictatorial.
Yes.
Would you like to explain that a bit, Victoria?
Sure. All right. So for the Speak Up Club, because we're an MUN club, most of our meetings are centered around practices for MUNs or discussions about current events.
Okay.
And so, in a way, it's not necessarily like a transferal of knowledge, like in a classroom if you're a TA. It's more like practicing the skills and making sure that people are aware of what they're saying. Right? So, I can't really tell person A to think in the same political mindset as me. Right?
No, because then it's not necessarily a discussion. Yeah, it's just you telling them
So
stuff.
In that sort of situation, you're kind of like, how do I make sure that they have the right understanding without dictating them to think like I do? Because it's in politics, you need to have different opinions for things to work, right? Right. So what we did as leaders, when we would have different discussion groups and each leader would be in charge of one group, we would set a set list of questions that could direct the discussion. And again, that kind of ties into the planning, as you said earlier, so that everything is structured in the meeting. Right. And
so they have a direction to go, which is kind of like what you want to accomplish in the meeting. Yeah. But they're not being told what to think about such topics.
So it gives them some direction on what they need to think about.
That makes sense.
And as the questions, as we go through the questions, eventually it kind of gets a bit deeper.
Ooh, we like that.
And we segue into that, I guess.
Right. Encouraging critical thinking, guys.
Yeah. And, if there are some times when some of my club members, they say something, and what they say is valid, but they kind of forget that they're contradicting themselves. Right. Because sometimes, like, when you're really passionate and, like, talking about nuclear proliferation or something, you right away get into, like, this thing and you forget.
But you do tell them that they're being self-contradictory, or no?
So what I do personally in my situation, because when you say, you're being self-contradictory, that's like so mean. So what I would do as leader to kind of keep it within the bounds of like, hey, be aware of yourself, I would ask that person, like, follow-up question. Right. So what did the thing that you said before mean then?
Okay. So it's being clear that they are contradicting themselves without telling them they are contradicting themselves explicitly.
Yeah. So I allowed them the time to think for themselves and internalize it, I guess.
I see. Yeah,
so
that's good.
It's like directing their...
So they realize it themselves.
Yeah. And so they can accept it a bit better. And they won't think that I'm like some arrogant know-it-all.
Yeah, that's good.
Right?
Yeah, I guess for me, it's similar in the sense that when we are having discussions, I think we obviously have the questions and prompts, and we kind of let them talk. But for me personally, especially over Zoom and online learning, people are sometimes shy and don't take the initiative to talk themselves. So what I do so that we don't waste time is immediately point to a person. Because I'm sure I have the faith that all of them have something important and valid to say. So I don't think it's being unfair to just point someone out, because I try to point everyone out throughout various points of the discussion or whatever activities we're doing.
Yeah.
So it's pretty fair, and I don't think that's being bossy or trying to dictate the discussion necessarily, but it's just getting the discussion going. And then I would sometimes, when someone says something, I point the follow-up question to a friend, just to make sure they are paying attention without yelling at them to pay attention. You know what I mean? Or asking their friends to repeat what they said, but not being like, hey, can you repeat what the person said? But rather asking, so what do you think about what so-and-so said? So it's their opinion on what that person said. So in that way, you know that they've been paying attention, but you also get their take on whatever it is that was mentioned before. So I think that's a way to kind of keep the class going and show that focus is very important without making the students feel very suffocated in the class and embarrassed. Yes.
So I think in a way, don't treat your children like incompetent woodland sprites. Okay?
Yes, please don't do that.
Treat them like, especially since you're in high school, right? And the thing is, it's kind of hard to instate your authority because you're kind of dumb. Like, they don't take you as seriously as a teacher.
I mean, even though in drama they are about 2 years younger than us, so we technically have more experience, and maybe like especially in drama or theater with all the other stuff we do outside of drama class. But I think it's important that even though I said you want to be very clear in your instructions and word it in a way that everyone would understand, don't ever word things or over explain things in a way which makes them feel like you're explaining it to a stupid child. A child who doesn't know anything. Because they do know things. They have the capability to think for themselves, to explore various avenues of how to do something. So you want to give them that sort of freedom and faith, but at the same time you want to, again, like we've mentioned before, direct them in the right sort of direction. And that's not to say that they have to always take our advice or do things the way we would personally do it, because everyone has their own style, but you should help them find that style.
So don't underestimate your kids.
Nope.
Don't overestimate them either and be too big brain. Just be aware of their context, especially because you've been through their shoes before.
Exactly.
Right? And probably if you were in clubs back then, like when you were younger, you've seen leaders who were good and those who weren't so clear, and you can even learn from them too.
Exactly.
Right?
I would say don't feel like you're the only one contributing to their learning. Or allowing them to have this sort of amazing experience, because they are contributing to your learning and your experience as much as you are to them. Because I would say I've learned so much from leading certain initiatives or like projects, and also teaching in this drama class, and perhaps I've even learned more than them. And that's not something to be taken lightly. You have to be aware that you are always learning, no matter how old you are or how far into your career or how successful you are. You always have ways you can improve. So especially now that we're only in high school, we can't think that we've reached the pinnacle of success in whatever field we're trying to lead.
For sure.
Because obviously we know nothing pretty much.
So moving on, another step that is very crucial to be a great leader is research.
Research.
Now
so important.
You wanna explain this?
Yes. Okay. So I love researching, so this is quite exciting for me. And I love creating lesson plans, in part because of how much you can learn while you're planning the lesson. Because you, like I've mentioned plenty of times before, you don't know everything. So even though you might have an idea of, let's say we made a lesson of comparing film with theater, of course you have ideas in your mind and you know certain things maybe based on your personal experience, but you want to watch interviews of other people. You want to do your research, open up several sites and not just refer to one site, just to see what is similar across the board, what are some differences, how you respond to certain opinions, whether you agree or disagree with it. And it doesn't mean you have to conduct a very in-depth research, make a research paper about everything, because obviously that's unreasonable, and you don't have the time for that, most likely. But you want to make sure that the information you are imparting upon your students is valid and is actually applicable to not only their life in that particular discipline, but also to their learning in general and their lives. Because I think you want your learning to have real application and not just be fact-based, or let me remember that one thing and I'll be successful, because that's not what it is. You're learning skills to make you a more successful person in real life, I think. So you want to make sure that your approach to teaching or leading something is very holistic, I guess. And that requires research, because you want to give many perspectives so that you can also give your own perspective, but encourage them to have their own perspective as well.
Exactly. And of course, you don't want to be that sort of leader when your kids don't know something and they ask you, and it's something that's rather simple that you can't answer.
Exactly. You want to be informed, because how can you expect them to improve or to know the answers to certain things or know how to explore certain things when you don't? That's embarrassing, and you can't have higher expectations of the people you are leading or teaching, more so than yourself,
And by knowing, again, those different perspectives and being aware, you can also tailor your transferal of knowledge, or your teaching.
Wonderful. Yes.
To suit the context of the kids that you're teaching. Because, for example, I think when you go online and you research, sometimes you can only find sources that are very big brain people, on JSTOR or something, right? And those big research papers, and they use vocabulary that your club members or your students will not be able to understand at the moment. Well, you can't just regurgitate. You need to also engage with it as well and make sure that, okay, I understand the concept and I'm able to teach it to kids who are
Be an active researcher, not a passive one.
Because honestly, for example, when I talk to my teachers as well, the stuff they teach us isn't actually pretty easy, especially in diploma program. It's not easy, but the fact that they're able to not dumb it down, but to transfer that knowledge
to our context
and make it understandable. It's oh, okay, that makes sense.
Exactly.
And I think with researching, of course there are two types. One is the type where you really go deep in you go find books, find articles, Google everything, blah blah blah. That's kind of the know-how and the conceptual stuff. But there's also the experiential research.
Yes.
Which is so
that's
crucial.
very important. I think that's often underestimated as well.
Experiential research, because not only does that kind of show that you're kind of a reliable source because you've been through it yourself, it also makes you able to empathize a bit better
and make it relatable to them. For example, because we've been through drama class, we know what parts are maybe more challenging or how you wish certain things were maybe delivered to you. And that's not reflecting negatively upon our teacher, but of course there are different types of learner in every class. And so trying to understand them as individuals and learners, and trying to figure out how we can better better explore our material and suit it to make it suitable for them. Sorry, my brain died. And for research, for example, I also think another important thing is don't ever give your students, for example, a video that you haven't watched in full. Because if you can't watch a video fully without wanting to fall asleep and wanting to just be when is this gonna be over? And if you can't understand the video, how can they? understand or not fall asleep while watching that video.
Yeah, so you need to be aware of your students and really empathize with them.
Yeah.
Because then that will just make your leading much more impactful, because they will realize like, okay, I am learning, I am
And that you
improving.
care about them as individuals as well.
Yeah, that's so important, because clubs, teaching in a class, a big part of it is also the community that you build, right? Like once again, you don't want to just do it just so that you can look good to an admissions officer.
Right.
You want to actually make a tangible impact in other people's lives, because that's the joy of it. And with that,
Yes.
as we kind of already talked about this, but I guess that kind of highlights how it's so important
So important.
to know your club members, know your students, know your co-leaders, know them.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you really have to invest some time into this whole process of getting to know a person, the kind of teacher they are, partner, or student they are.
Yeah.
And it's not a waste of time to kind of just observe and take notes. Do take notes. I assure you it's worth it. I have lots of notes, whether it's from previous performances students did or just things that they do in class. I like to highlight, I like to log it into my notes section. And I think it just helps better inform you for future lessons to make everything a bit more productive and impactful, because then it's just a better use of your time and their time. You don't want to waste that learning experience, because you really only have about 3 hours a week or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so and especially if we're doing one-on-one, like Victoria and I try to focus in teaching drama class on more one-on-one sessions, because when we got involved there were 3 teachers instead of just one, which meant that we could better handle the class, I guess, in a way. So in your one-on-one sessions, you don't want to just, again, critique them all the time or just tell them ways in which they can improve or you think they can improve, but you want to encourage them to think and get to know not only what they're struggling with, but why they think they're struggling with those things. Because then it will help you figure out how you can better approach that sort of situation. Yeah.
And of course, different people, they accept feedback in different ways, so you need to be aware of the person you're talking to.
Right.
Because there are some people who, let's say, already have exposure to the field. So it's easy to talk to them in the terminology that's required in that field.
Yep.
Whereas you talk to a beginner, you might need to show some examples, or you might need to I think in the drama class there were some times when I had to give an example of reading it out, reading the line out, not to dictate them to read it in the way that I did it, but to just give them an idea, to inspire them, right? So you need to, I guess, kind of know their personality a bit, and it's kind of hard to do when you don't know them that well. So you need to, doesn't mean you have to be best friends with them, but you just need to be observant of their character, I guess.
And you have to just show that you are available to them. Of course, we were both very busy at the time, so it's not like we were always on call. But I tried to show them that if they wanted to schedule an extra meeting or they wanted to meet during a break time, I would try to make myself available. And not everyone took up that opportunity, and it didn't matter to me, but for the people that did,
that's nice.
That's good for them, I wanted to make sure that they knew I was available, whether they took it up or not. It didn't matter to me. It just means that some people want a more hands-on approach maybe, and then in that way you can also learn the type of student they are and how they receive information best. And I guess when you ask them to kind of reveal stuff about themselves to you and you want to get to know them, you have to also be willing to shed some layers yourself. Because if you're not willing to be a fool, make a fool out of yourself, and be an embarrassment sometimes, especially in drama class, you can't ask them to do something crazy if you're not willing to do it yourself. So you have to have that sort of transparency and sort of equal footing in your approach to leadership, I think.
And in my experience, besides the MUN club, I was also frequently chairing several MUNs. And as a chair, you kind of have to lead the discussion and make sure that everyone is staying within the bounds of, the discussion and answering the big questions that we need to solve.
Right.
And sometimes it's a bit challenging because most of the people that are in that committee you've never met before. Like they're from completely different schools. Like you only know that they have interacted with the briefing that you wrote.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so they do kind of feel an interaction from you, but you've never felt an interaction from them. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's a 2-day event. And it's like from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. Oh my god, And it's just people talking. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, like, as a chair, it's so easy, especially online, to like zone out. You just count the minutes, like, okay, time is up, delegate, next person, Right. But it's so crucial to pay attention, especially when you're thinking about who should deserve an award. Or when kids come WhatsApp you and say, hey, so what do you think I can improve in from today's meetings and committee sessions, Mm-hmm. That really taught me how to have to pay attention to the way a person could take feedback or be encouraged, even though I've never met them before at all. Yeah. It's just it's a bit awkward because, there is a high chance that you can have a misconception. Yeah. But that's why.
But you have to be willing to put yourself out there and just kind of take a risk sometimes.
And the good thing with MUN is the fact that people kind of do expose themselves with having to talk a lot. Mm-hmm. So, you get to see like, okay, this person seems to be, a happy-go-lucky person. Okay, I think she can take feedback a bit easier. Oh, this person is more serious. Okay, I think maybe I should just be more orderly and organized. So, you don't have to be fully correct, but you need to pay attention.
Yeah,
and
of course.
A way to, show yourself a bit more is like, just chat. Doesn't mean you're best friends, but open yourself up. And like, maybe you won't be best friends after, but you can come out of it knowing, okay, I know someone quite well. Mm-hmm. Right.
And I guess in a way you can motivate your students is to be engaged and to, like, you can't just expect them to be the ones that nod along and to be willing to participate in things. You have to also smile at times, make facial expressions, use your face, especially in drama, nod along, use some hand gestures when you speak, because it creates a more sort of open atmosphere rather than a sort of constricting, confining situation. Yeah. So I think, in conclusion,
know them.
Yes. But also to conclude this episode as a whole, I would say as a student leader or maybe like a TA, whatever leadership position you find yourself in, you have to be willing to put in the work to plan. You have to know, like, even though you are, I guess, in a position of authority in a way, you can be assertive and you should be, but you should also know the boundaries and not be super bossy. You have to treat your members as intelligent and capable human beings as well, and people who can bring something to the table, because you're not the only person that can bring something to the table. And next, you have to be willing to do your research as well and really take the time to inform yourself so that you can be of more use to your other peers, I suppose. And of course, last but definitely not least, know them. We did not plan that. I'm sorry that you had to hear that. Anyway, guys.
Yes.
So, I hope this episode was beneficial and that you are encouraged to be a leader and to take that initiative and to put yourself out there a bit more. And we are
two Tweedledums Thinking.
Yes.
And it seems contradictory to what Tweedledums are, but honestly, we are outliers.
We are.
Those are our thoughts for today, and we hope we got you thinking. Not too much though, otherwise you won't listen to us anymore. My name is Victoria.
And my name is Talya.
And this is Two Tweedledums Thinking.
See you Tweedledies next time.
Bye!